What's up, guys? This is Brent with the Dog Trainers Podcast, and I want to introduce to you a new segment that we're going to be adding to the Dog Trainers Podcast feed from my podcast, the CANIS Podcast. Now, anything that is oriented towards professional dog trainers and business development, we're going to call it the CANIS Pro Series. So anything that you guys see on the DTP feed that has the words CANIS Pro on it will be my contribution about business development, about building systems, building teams, working with clients, developing curriculums, anything that you guys might need to help become better dog trainers and better entrepreneurs within your business. Again, I'm not an authority in all this. I've just done a lot of the work. So we are going to be having some special guests on the CANIS Pro Series as well. People who are entrepreneurs in their own right, both in the dog training industry and also outside of the dog training industry. So stay tuned for episode 1. Here we go. What's up, guys? It's Brent with DTP, and what we're going to talk about is doing phone calls with new leads and potential clients. This is part of our season 4 dedicated to business development and professional development. And this episode is specifically for those dog trainers who are having a hard time either closing deals, getting people to come in for assessments, getting people to agree to meet with you. Now, whether you charge for assessments or do free assessments, or you're having a hard time closing like low ticket items like group classes or private sessions or a single private session, right? I really hope that this gives you value. And so I just kind of want to frame what the problem is. So let's say you guys paid a lot of money to Google or to some type of marketing agency, and you're getting a bunch of leads in. And all of those leads are coming in and you're calling them, and but for some reason, you're just not closing. You're not getting them in the door. They're not buying something. And so there's obviously going to be a lot of layers to maybe why they're not buying. But the first place that it starts with me grabbing my phone, putting that number in, and talking to the client. And talking to that client, you have a small amount of time on the phone to see if you can help this client, to see if they're even going to be a good client for you. But most importantly, in this episode, we're going to go over kind of the phases of how we create a good rapport with a client over the phone. In an ideal world, have them get excited to come and see you and start working with you. So we're going to break down 3 basic phases in this episode. These are going to be some of the same tips and pointers that I give my own staff members. I have about 8 trainers with my company, and every single one of them have been able to learn these tips and learn this process. And you don't get good at it overnight, right? What I actually have to do at work is I'll listen to their phone calls because everything's recorded, and I'm able to give them feedback after every single call. So our staff members are able to get really, really good at this process really, really quick because they're constantly getting lots and lots of coaching. So here we go. Let's break down this process. All right. So if we're going to break this down into 3 basic stages, stage number 1, you got to get to know the client and the dog. Right? This is also known as qualification. Number 2, we got to demonstrate value and also credibility. And then number 3, we have to get good at making recommendations. And as long as we follow things in 1, 2, 3 basic steps, by the time we get to step 3, it's going to seem pretty easy to make recommendations. All right. So here we go with stage number 1, getting to know a client and the dog, qualification questions, right? Now, this is our opportunity, guys. The way I teach it to my staff is I'll tell them, just try to make a friend. Make a friend on the phone. And sometimes that's hard because sometimes people come in really, really dry. Sometimes they're just like, can I get the prices? How much do you charge for this? How much do you charge for that? And if we don't know how to socially turn that around and open up opportunities for us to actually ask them questions and kind of get to know a little bit about them, to know about their dog, about their situation, then it's going to be really hard to not just fall into people pleaser mode and be like, our private sessions are $100 and we have group classes, but it's a really good deal. And then we got this and you're just going to start mumbling over and over and over. Part of what we got to do is we have to remember a couple things. We're making a friend. We're the professional, and we're there to help them and help serve them. And framing things in this way is super duper important, because if you don't frame it in the right way and you're coming from a place of scarcity or oh my God, I hope I make this sale, or I hope this person likes me, or whatever. If you don't act like you're already qualified, then they're going to hear that over the phone, right? So you guys have to remember one thing. You are definitely more knowledgeable than the person calling you on the phone, right? And a lot of times we get so nervous, but my mentor used to always tell me, he's like, you've put hundreds of hours into your craft, if not thousands of hours into your craft. You have to remember, you know way more than the average dog owner, and you have the knowledge and skills to be able to help them with their real basic dog problems. And as soon as he would tell me that, it would be really, really empowering. So those of you guys who have a little bit of imposter syndrome, keep that in mind. You might have it, but you know more than the average bear, and you really, really need to stand tall. And remember, you're the specialist. They're calling for your help. And just having that confidence over the phone is going to be really, really helpful. Okay. So when I'm trying to get to know a little bit about the clients and the dogs, first thing that I'll do, this is one approach. There's a bunch of approaches you could take, but this is one approach. Usually if you were to ask a question like, so what's going on with the dog, right? People are going to start listing off all of the problems, right? They're going to start listing off like, oh, well, he pulls and he jumps and he sucks at this. But then what has to happen is then I have to try and backtrack, and I have to try and be like, all right, well, tell me about life when, when did you start noticing this happening? All right. How old was he when he started seeing this, right? Then I have to start kind of reverse engineering how we got to this place where your dog is lunging and jumping and all this stuff. So what I tend to do is I'll just straight up take control of the conversation after that. And if they're saying like, hey, here's a common one. It's like, hey, I just want to know how much you guys charge for training. And I'll say something along the lines of like, yeah, totally happy to give you all the prices. Before we do that though, would you mind telling me a little bit about what's going on? And then they'll say, oh, yeah, of course. And then I'll kind of cut them off and I'll say, and if you don't mind, so a lot of times when I have this conversation with people, they tend to tell me a list of problems that they're having. But could you do me a favor and actually tell me tell me the whole story from the beginning, like when you got them, where you got them, and kind of how we got to this point. And just kind of, I just need to know maybe where things happen and when something might have changed. So just tell me the whole origin story of your dog, if you will. And people go like, okay, well, and then some people are super detailed. They'll be like, well, I got him when he was 8 weeks old at this breeder in South Carolina, and he got shipped over to me when he was 8 weeks old. And like, they'll give you all of these details that maybe you didn't know you needed, but it's really important if you tell them, tell me the story of how we got here, right? Because if I do it the other way, I have to try to reverse engineer and kind of pull this information out of people. And it works for me wonderfully, right? It's really cool. They tell me when they rescued the dog or around how old or what age, the dog started lunging or barking or displaying the bad behavior. And it just saves me from having to ask a lot of like follow-up questions or like fill in the gap questions, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So number one, we want to get to kind of know the dog's story and then also understand the issues and how we got here. Okay. Now, this doesn't have to be in any particular order, but simultaneously, when we're talking to clients, we also need to kind of understand the lifestyle blueprint that this dog is living in, right? So like when I say lifestyle blueprint, I'm like, is it a single owner? Is it a couple? Is it a family? Is it a family with kids? Is it a family with kids and housekeepers? Is it a family with kids, housekeepers, security guards? What type of environment is this dog growing up in? And then also, like, how active is everybody with the dog? Is this a dog that, never leaves the house? Is this a dog that goes places with some of the family members? We have to just understand lifestyle blueprint. Now, a couple of things that will happen that have nothing to do with dog behavior. It's also really important for you guys to understand. And I know it sounds a little weird because it's like, this is going to be about understanding what social economic class your client comes from. Right? But here are some questions that are really important to know. If at some point throughout that conversation, you know what this person does for a living, right? Oh, I'm constantly at the law office for a long time. Well, it's a lawyer. Okay. If you find out like, mom is a stay-at-home mom and she has housekeepers, well, then we're looking at upper middle class, right? If if it's just a young college student who is constantly in class and, can barely make rent, then that's a different story, right? But there's a lot of cool tells to like little things from like where the kids go to school to, do both parents work? Do one parent's work? Do they have other members of the family that help take care of the dog? Do they have other people like staff that help take care of the dog? All of this really helps us kind of understand, where their social economic class is. Because I will say this, when I was a young dog trainer, $100 was a lot of money for me. right? Like it literally made the difference between making my rent and not making my rent. Then eventually $1,000 was a lot of money for me, right? Where I couldn't even fathom spending $1,000 on anything, right? And then we're over here trying to sell packages of dog training that's like $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, right? And it can be really scary, especially if you yourself do not understand kind of the ratio of how money works, right? And there are people who, they spend $500 on a dinner for two. There are people who, their monthly payment on their car is $1,000. You know what I mean? So charging them for $1,000 group class package is just a car payment to them, and they don't mind it. And I say this is important because sometimes as young trainers trying to sell something or talk to people, let's just assume everyone has money, right? Just assume it, because a lot of times we will sell ourselves short. We will sell our services short. We will already be premeditating like discounts or ways of getting them to want to work with us that have to do with money versus the value that we're going to add to their lives and how we're going to take their pain away through dog training. All right. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that helps some of you guys. But I just remember being a young dog trainer, like knowing the value of money, or not knowing that a lot of people, especially adults who with families, have way more money than me. So it can be kind of scary. So I'm moving on from that point. But if you guys relate to it, just let us know in the comments on the podcast. Okay. And then the last thing is, once you understand the origin of the dog, once you understand the lifestyle blueprint, like now you can start kind of playing this movie in your head where you can kind of start seeing, if I was a dog living in this lifestyle blueprint with this background, I could totally see why if I was the dog, I'd be scared of X, Y, and Z, or I'd be reacting like this, and this, or because I wasn't socialized the first 6 months of my life. Like you just start putting the pieces together, and you can start putting yourself in the shoes of the dog, in the shoes of the family, and you can actually start relating to them, right? And then it can kind of help you get a better idea of like how we got to these problems that they're calling about in the first place. All right, guys. So I would say these are my basic notes for phase 1, how to get to know the client and get to know the dog, also known as qualification. The 3 stages are going to be you need to know the dog's origin story. You need to know the lifestyle blueprint of the family and the dog. And then just make sure that you have a clear idea of how all of those things could have led to these issues. And not necessarily you have to have the answers, but have theories or ideas about it. All right. We're going to move on to stage 2, which is called demonstrate value and credibility. All righty, guys. So stage 2 is called demonstrating value or credibility, right? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean like I have to rattle off like, oh, I have this certification and that certification, because that stuff kind of looks like flexing, right? And there are some people, then they go on your website before they even called you, but a small percentage of people know about those credentials, right? Those letters at the end of your name don't really mean something unless you have a really educated person looking for those things. But demonstrating value and demonstrating credibility is important in stage 2. But actually, now that I'm about to jump into stage 2, I want us to kind of just review in stage 1 what happens as a result of following these steps. Okay. So in step 1, if we go through this process of asking them questions, getting to know their story, getting to understand, maybe how the dog got there, and just taking the time to listen to someone and hear out their problems, we start entering real like primitive psychological bonding things, right? People are like, they feel like we're there to help them. They feel like we care. And the reality of it is no one cares how much you know unless they feel that you care about them. Does that make sense? If they think like you genuinely have the dog's best interests at heart or their best interests at heart, and the way you do that is by being really interested in their situation and helping them through this problem, right? So step 1, if we do it correctly, this person feels that they can start trusting you. You're very helpful so far, right? And that's the goal of number 1, or the first stage. Now, jumping into stage 2, what we got to look at is demonstrating credibility. You can be a nice person. You could be very kind. You can be very charming. You can be very caring, all of those things. But now this is where we have room. We have a whole origin story. We have a lifestyle blueprint. We also now know all the issues and have potential theories of how this dog's past could have led to these issues. right? So now the first stage in demonstrating value credibility that I like to do, number one, I like to relate to them and I like to educate them. So relate and educate is the step, right? And what I mean by relate is, I remember when I was a young dog trainer, I used to like the bells would go off or the sirens would go off in my head when someone, would do something like, you didn't crate train the dog. That's why that happened. Or, oh, it's because you spoiled the dog. Oh, it's because you let the dog on the couch. Oh, it's because you have no boundaries with the dog, right? And my brain would just rattle off everything that is wrong from the information that I got, right? And then I would go ahead and like tell them everything that I saw that they were doing wrong, right? And I guess that is a form of education, but there's no relating involved, right? In actuality, what it does, it kind of like punches down a little bit. And sometimes it can come off kind of arrogant. We can make clients feel stupid. We can make clients feel like, oh my God, I'm a failure. And sometimes half of them are calling because they already feel like failures. So like putting lemon on the wound isn't helpful to them, right? So it's important that we relate and educate. What I mean by relate is try to understand the human side of this, right? Like these people didn't want their dogs to have a leash reactivity problem or to piss all over the house or whatever it might be. So try to understand what it is about human nature that comes from a good place that sometimes leads to these things. So like, here's a common one. Like if I have a client who, has a puppy and that puppy has all the freedom in the house, right? Relate to it and understand it. Don't make them feel crazy for doing that. Right? Even though we all know that it's wrong, the worst thing that people do is they give a puppy too much freedom. But let's say we were to say something like, you know what, Diane? Like, I don't know, Diane's like regular name, right? You know what, Diane? It totally makes sense that you want your dog to be free and you want your dog to be running around. But here's the issue with that. The issue is not freedom. The issue is unsupervised freedom. And this is usually where our puppies get in trouble. So what I would recommend for you is if you can keep your eyes on the puppy, he can be out in front of you. But if you have to go to the bathroom or you have to go, take a phone call or you're going to cook dinner, I would suggest putting your dog someplace that's puppy proof. So then that way we don't have to, come back to an accident or come back to something ripped up or destroyed, because unfortunately that's just going to get us frustrated with the dog. Right. And then honestly, one of the biggest issues that a lot of puppy owners have, like in general, is they give too much freedom too soon, right? So it's a common mistake, but we can simply remedy it by having a good strategy, right? So let's pause that, right? I related, I understood why she would do it, right? But then I also let her know, see, it's kind of leading to this issue that you called me about, the potty training issue, right? And so always try to take this approach, relate and educate. Now, as I'm educating them, what I'm actually kind of doing is I'm giving them these little tiny tips and like small ones, right? Like, put them away, like put them somewhere that's not, when you're unsupervised. Like that is a tip in and of itself, which sounds so simple and obvious to people, but it's a free giveaway. Like here's like a free bracelet. You know what I mean? It's a free information giveaway. And it could be anything from potty training. It could be anything from like, what I would suggest, how about I send you a link for some of my favorite chew toys for that puppy? Just little things like that where not only, again, you care, but you're helpful and you know what you're doing and you're doing it for free. So now you're just giving value to this person, right? Another form of like relate and educate would be like, a lot of people, they think, dogs might have had a bad past and that's why they're showing aggression, right? Which is true. Sometimes, some of them they do. And so sometimes I can say like, you know what, Diane, your dog lunging, it could be because, he had a bad past and maybe he got beat up by a German Shepherd and that's why he always lunges at German Shepherds, right? But I've also seen this behavior before with dogs who were fully socialized when they were young, dogs who come from really good families, and sometimes around puberty, we start just seeing behavioral change. We just start seeing behavioral change. And that behavioral change, if we don't have full influence over our dogs or control over our dogs, it can sometimes lead to this leash reactivity that you're dealing with, or this aggression that you're dealing with, right? And if it goes unchecked and we can't raise the dog out of it, unfortunately, behaviors get worse the more that they practice, right? And so that's an example. Again, I'm relating and I'm educating Diane, and I'm also letting her know from what I see professionally, from my experience, without flexing, but in a really helpful way. Yes, it could be this, but honestly, it also could be that. So relate and educate, and give tips away for free. Doesn't mean you try to solve their problems. By no means, right? This is a mistake I used to do as well. Like you talk to them and you say, okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to get a crate train and you're going to do this and you're going to put the leash on the dog, and like, don't try to give them a training protocol over the phone. And that's way too much because they're only going to get 20% of it right. Okay. That's where you wait for them to come in for the session and then you can give it to them there. Right. But giving them these little tiny free tips that will help alleviate their stress or the pain that they're going through, even if it's by 20%, 30%, 40%, 50% pain alleviation, they will be grateful for it. Right. Now, in this demonstrating value and credibility, a couple things that we're doing, again, psychologically with our clients. We are developing this relationship where not only are we kind and caring and helpful, but we also know what the hell we're talking about. And anytime that I refer to my past experience, doesn't mean I have to agree with my client, like, yeah, sure. Sometimes disagreeing with your client is a useful tool. You know what, Diane? I hear what you're saying, but I would have to disagree, and this is why. Now, automatically, if I tell her something that makes sense and that is more practical, right, then they're going to just have their mind blown and be like, wow, I didn't think about it that way. Now, all of a sudden, I am an authority figure and they are now under my charge and I'm helping to take care of them. So there's a lot of psychology going on here, guys. So it's really pay attention to these steps. They're super important. Okay. Also, by relating, I drop their guards. I don't make them feel shitty. Like a lot of dog trainers that I coach not only dog trainers I coach, but clients that I talk to on the phone, they'll tell us things like this. Like, so I called this other place and, they, within 2 minutes, they started just pitching me like this $5,000 board and train program. And they didn't care like what my dog knew. And they said like, for $5,000, we'll take care of X, Y, and Z for you. And it's like that person in 2 minutes definitely did not get to know this person. Definitely did not qualify the issues, definitely did not demonstrate value, and just literally went straight to trying to close the deal over the phone without even meeting a dog, right? Like, how weird is that? Now, here's the thing is I used to think, oh, that's just what bad companies do. No, that's what novice dog trainers do. That's what dog trainers who don't know how to actually connect and play with human psychology and actually just learn to connect properly with people so that they will want to give you money. That's just what that is. And I used to think that was being taught to people, that just 30 seconds on the phone, you just start pitching prices and trying to sign them up on the program. And maybe there are some sales team that's their approach, but I'll tell you what, it definitely doesn't create clients for life, and it definitely doesn't create community, and it's very transactional, and that's not the business we're in, people. We are in the family business. We're in helping people with dogs and their families, right? So that's my belief. All right. So far in phase 2 or stage 2, demonstrating value and credibility, relate and educate, and by giving those little bit of tips to help alleviate their stress, what we're doing is we're kind of creating also this desire for reciprocity, right? Humans are driven a lot by reciprocity. If I do something kind for you, you're naturally going to be driven to want to do something kind for me, which in the future could be maybe giving me money, right? Or coming to see me or coming to visit me, right? So that's stage 2. We're going to move on to stage 3, making recommendations. Alrighty, guys. Now we are finally at stage 3. Okay. This is making recommendations. Making recommendations. It sounds simple. And this is what people usually skip to. Like typically the bad phone call typically goes like this. Ring, ring, ring. Oh, hi. How's it going? I have a dog with leash reactivity. I want to know how much you guys charge for training, right? And that's all the qualification that they do. Then they go straight to recommendation. Oh, well, for leash reactivity, I would suggest you come and do like a 6-week board and train program. There's going to be e-collars involved, and there's going to be this and this involved, and, you don't get to see your dog at all. Like, the cliche board and train kind of spiel, right? But here's the problem with that. You went from asking 1 or 2 questions to straight recommendation, which in essence is selling, like automatically. Obviously, they're calling because they want something from you, but there is no human connection. There is no rapport development. There is no, development of a relationship with the client where they feel like, I can trust you. I think I would trust you with my dog in particular. At this point in that really, I guess, low value recommendation, that people aren't going to drop $5,000 like that. Some people do, don't get me wrong. but most people don't feel comfortable dropping $5,000 like that over the phone. Okay. And here's the thing, guys. A lot of times these recommendations are literally maybe just a plea to meet with each other, right? Like it's literally just a recommendation. Like, you know what we should do? We should meet in person. That's the recommendation, so I could help you better. Because there's a couple things that are true. Any behavioral problem, from leash reactivity or aggression, it's contextual. And so what we kind of want to see as dogs as dog trainers is we want to see the context in which what you're telling me is true, right? So regardless of the issue, getting the person to come see you in person is not weird. It's not like a weird next step. It's actually the obvious next step. So it's kind of like, setting up with a mechanic. It's like, you're not going to go to the mechanic and be like, how much to fix my car? The mechanic's going to be like, well, these are the general prices for oil changes, but what if something else is wrong with your car? Bring the car in, let's do a full diagnostic on the car, and then I'll let you know how much it's going to cost. That makes logical sense for someone who wants the best for their car. Makes sense. So sometimes the recommendations could be to come see you in person for an evaluation. Whether it's paid or not paid, that would be a different, podcast episode that we do later. But it could also just be, you know what? Honestly, Diane, your issues are so simple. I would just suggest jumping into one of our basic group classes. Our basic group classes are this price at this day, and it's super inexpensive. It's probably one of our most inexpensive options. I would start there, and we can get the dog started on some curriculum. And then as we kind of get to know each other, we can go ahead and elaborate on it when you're done with the class, right? So it could be a low ticket item. You could sell a small little group class. You could sell a single private session over the phone, or you could set up an evaluation if there is a more in-depth behavioral problem that you might need. Now, I don't know, not everyone does evaluations these days. Sometimes they try to do it all over the phone. My suggestion is get them to come meet you in person. Because, yeah, you can have a great phone conversation, which is great, but the likelihood that they spend a lot of money with you goes up when they meet you in person. Okay? This allows you to give visual presentation. It allows you to look your best. It allows you to show them things. It allows you to actually diagnose them in person. And so anytime that I suggest an evaluation, it kind of goes something like this, right? So it'd be like, you know what, Diane, after all of the things that we've kind of talked about, what I honestly think our next step should be is just find out time to meet each other. Because I really would love to see you interact with your dog. I'd really love to see your dog around other dogs. And most importantly, you said you've done some training in the past. I'd really like to see what he knows in person and kind of what systems you've worked with. And that'll help me get a better idea of how to best pick up and take off from where you are currently. Right. Or let's say there's like an aggression case, right? And you know what? It makes a lot of sense for your dog to be extremely aggressive at home and in your territory and towards dogs, in his space. So Diane, I would really suggest, we really have to see where this aggression is stemming from. I don't know if this is just territorial. I don't know if it's all dogs, some dogs, small dogs, big dogs. But here, if you come to my location, I have several dogs here that I could safely temperament test your dog around and read his body language and have a better idea of where this is coming from. Because I'm not a cookie cutter trainer. It's not a one size fits all approach. I really need to see where your dog is, and most importantly, how you handle your dog. Because I'm pretty sure if your dog has been showing aggression for this amount of time, I'm pretty sure that you've been affected by it too. And I'm pretty sure you don't have all the best habits either. So I'd want to see what those habits are, because part of my job is to really make sure that you're fully coached as well. And so I'm kind of assessing you and the dog simultaneously. All right. So does that sound appropriate? And she'll be like, oh yeah, that sounds appropriate. Let's come in for the evaluation. So again, I'm just making these things up, just riffing off of them. But the basic idea is I want to see you in person, right? It's one way to look at this is actually kind of funny. You could look at it like trying to go on a first date with someone, right? I want to have such a good conversation with you that if I asked you for your number or asked you on another date, that you would happily come and show up on that date, right? And that's kind of what the beginning of sales is, at least in my opinion, right? It's how do I get you to trust me enough that we can meet again and see where this goes. Does that make sense? So those would be the recommendations. You could recommend an evaluation, whether it's free or paid, does not matter, but recommend it. Number two, you could also sell low ticket items. Okay. You could also make other recommendations, guys. There's been other times that I've made recommendations of like, I know you just got this rescue dog 3 days ago. I wouldn't come yet for this assessment. I wouldn't start training right now. But what I will do is I'm going to give you a breakdown of what I think you should do over the next 2 to 3 weeks with this rescue dog so that he can decompress, so that he can relax. And then I'll check in on you in 10 days, but let's schedule something for 3 weeks out from now so that we can give this dog the best assessment that he can get. Because right now he's too overstressed, and whatever assessment we do right now will not be a good one. You know what I mean? And when I do something like that, I completely show them that my morals and my value, it's not about the money. It's about what's best for their dog, right? When I stand up on my principles and I say, I could start training with you right now, but based on what you're saying with your dog, how he's shut down or he's not taking food, I don't think we'd be successful training anyways. So what's best for you and best for your dog and best for your investment, let's wait 3 weeks. Again, let me demonstrate my value and give you these tips for free. And let's lock something in for 3 weeks from now, right? Again, we're still recommending something, but it may not be something expedient. And we can also take the fact that we care about the dog, we care about the people, we care about their investment, and we can use it as a signal to them to say like, hey, I'm a stand-up guy. I'm a stand-up gal. You know what I mean? I want your money, but I don't need your money that bad, right? So those are our 3 steps, guys. Breaking them down one more time. Stage 1, get to know your clients and the dogs. Pretty much just qualify the situation. Step number 2, demonstrate value and credibility. Make sure that you guys relate and educate your clients over the phone. And then number 3, make recommendations to meet in person, whether it's to come to my group class, whether it's to do a private session, whether it's to do an assessment in real time, in real life, or to do an assessment later down the line. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful. I'm trying to keep these episodes pretty short so you guys can plow through them and listen to them again. Let me know if there's any other resources you guys want on this subject. I'm happy to make another video or a couple posts online. Yeah, this was fun. This is my first solo episode, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I hope you guys found some value, and I hope you guys are able to close more deals and bring more clients into your locations. Again, my name is Brent LaBrada, and this is the Dog Trainers Podcast, Season 4, Business Development episode. All right, we'll talk to you guys later. Peace.